And now it's time to get our macro perspective on what else is happening around us in the world. It's time for World Deconstructed with David Tizzard joining us via Zoom. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Lena. Great to see you. And I finally feel like it's Christmas time almost with that song that was just played. Thank you for getting me in the spirit.
Me too, finally. Happy Christmas Eve.
Happy Christmas Eve. Yes. And we have to do this again tomorrow, don't we?
Yes, we do. Coming to you live on Christmas Day.
Wonderful.
Good to be with the team, though. I'm so thankful for Good Morning Seoul. I really am.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's people that make it all worthwhile. And it shows that the news, the media and community never stops. In that sense, this morning, we're talking about Senegal, the westernmost country in Africa, situated on the Atlantic Ocean, right there on the coast. It's older than me, gained its independence in 1960. We'll be talking about its relationship with France. And in terms of economy, Senegal's been growing quite well, reaching around sort of 6.1% growth. So it's doing well, but it's still dealing with the issues of the past. And Senegal and its new president is trying to sever ties with France.
The fact that its economy is doing stronger, doing better, maybe that provides some context, not all of it, why it can afford to cut military ties with France. Maybe not the full story, but sometimes countries can't afford to do that. But it does raise a few red flags, I would assume, for some business owners who still need to rely on, well, its French connections.
Absolutely. And a lot of it is, it's not just its economy, Lena, but that is a very good point that you make. It's also its new president. This is President Bassirou Diomaye Faye. He's more commonly known as just Diomaye. And he was elected president this year. And he's really been influential in trying to address Senegal's colonial past, to remove French influence. And so he talks often of sort of a pan-African sentiment. He's really trying to have an Africa for Africans idea. He also has, even though French is the official language of Senegal, he has most of his speeches delivered and also translated into Wolof, which is the local indigenous language. And just last month, Diomaye, he asked Paris to remove the 350 French troops stationed on Senegalese soil. And while this sort of statement was perhaps expected by some, nevertheless, it caused great disruption in Paris because the new president has said these foreign troops on our soil, they have got to be removed. And this is what he said in the speech. I'll just give the words of the Senegalese president. He said, Senegal is an independent country. It's a sovereign country, and sovereignty does not accept the presence of military bases in a sovereign country.
David, can I ask you a question? Is the Wolof language widely spoken in Senegal?
Yeah, it is, but it's not just in Senegal. It's in the entire Western African region. People will understand Wolof. That's the indigenous language rather than French. So, you know, we often find it interesting to see that there are countries in Africa that speak either French or Portuguese or English, sometimes even German or Italian. And that's because of the nature of the colonialism that took place during the 19th and 20th century. But Wolof is one of the indigenous ones. It's relatively straightforward. So in French, you have gendered nouns. You know, the pen is a male, and the table, une table, is a female, and such forth. I think, if memory serves. But Wolof, the local language, it's far more straightforward in terms of grammar. No gendered nouns, and I can tell you that Nangadef means "how are you" in the local Wolof language.
So sort of cutting military ties with France, that is Senegal's latest efforts. But is it just Senegal, or is sort of this move to step away or push back against their former colonizer, is that something that's happening in different parts of Africa too? Do we see it in different parts of the region?
Yeah, that's a really good point. We do see it in different parts of the region. And so we've seen ruling military groups in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad, they've all removed French troops from their soil. And what's happened there, which makes it a little bit different, in those countries that I just mentioned, you have a ruling military group. And when they came to power through sort of coups d'etats and uprisings, because the French government didn't support those military coups and uprisings, the French were then sort of not seen on the side of these groups. And so then you have seen the replacement of French support often with Russian military groups instead. But what makes Senegal different is that it's not ruled by a military group. It has sort of democratic elections and it has a different parliamentary system. And so Senegal is one of the countries where France's influence, not just its influence, but its military presence is being removed from a country that's not based on the military. And, you know, a lot of this is coming because of these countries. They have deeper relations with China. China is often the biggest trade partner now for these African countries because China is big and China's got lots of money and China is willing to trade. And also it doesn't have the history of colonialism and all those effects there. So it comes in with sort of a clean slate almost. You have also Russia trying to expand its influence in the era. So these African countries with the scars of colonialism, they're kicking out the old, and when the new is there, they're sort of looking at that with more open eyes, it would seem.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Yeah, no, exactly. But the old, I think it's probably something worth saying about the old, because I realize sometimes how little I know about the world when I do these things. For Senegal, for example, here in South Korea, we know all about sort of the Jeju uprising, the March 1st movement, the Gwangju massacre, all of these events that really resonate. And even though their history, they're still alive today and they serve so much of Korean culture. The same is true in Senegal. When the president made that speech last month, it was on the 80th anniversary of the mass killings of West African soldiers by French forces. And so this is French forces killing their own soldiers because they won't go to fight for France during the Second World War in 1944. They argue about how many died. France has really kept quiet about this massacre until about 2012. Recently this year, President Emmanuel Macron in France sort of admitted that France had committed a massacre, but that's only come this year, sort of after 80 years of Senegal and other countries saying, look what you did to our people. And so those scars, it's not just talk of sort of postmodern decolonization. There's real death and murder here in which Senegal is trying to get over and out with the old and in with the new.
Thank you so much, David Tizzard, for uncovering details of Senegal that otherwise we would have really never learned. Thank you so much, and happy Christmas Eve to you. Because we have time on the clock, which we never do, our question on Balkan Topping is pretty light and fluffy because it is Christmas Eve. Do you like romantic comedy films at all?
Do I like? Yes, of course. I'm thinking of the Richard Curtis ones. I'm thinking of Four Weddings and a Funeral, Notting Hill. They're romantic comedies, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Absolutely. Because apparently during the holiday seasons, people are more inclined to turn to romantic comedies, easy flicks. And I was just picking your brain on what some of your favorites might be.
Yeah, I think those two, I've got to give a shout out to Trading Places, though. That's not a romantic comedy, but it's one of my favorite films. I'm not sure it would really get made today in the idea of political correctness and sensitivity with some of the things they do. But yeah, Four Weddings and a Funeral, Notting Hill, and then a big shout out to Trading Places.
Thank you, David. I'll speak to you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.